Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues and listeners, here we are again. And believe it or not, it's another Friday. We're ahead of the time again. And we're just closing up now on another week. And I've got my partner in crime, Stephen, with me. So, Steve, as always, lovely to see you, my friend.
Hello, Chris. How are you doing?
Very good, sir. Lovely, lovely new hairstyle there you're sporting.
I managed to get a haircut, Chris, just before it wasn't possible as of Thursday this week. So that should keep me going for a little while longer, I think.
Fair play to you, my friend. Looks good. Looks good. Steve, what another bloody week, eh?
Terribly depressing now, Chris.
Hey.
It's getting very depressing. I'm not sure that we, that we see an end in sight at this moment in time. With some of the news that we're seeing, more job losses, furlough schemes being extended for 6 months, massive redundancy at the end of October, and like the furlough ending in October, so businesses making decisions based on that. Announcements of parking aircraft up, selling of aircraft, scrapping units. It's getting quite it has been depressing for some time. But this week I haven't seen anything positive to be able to bring to the party today.
We'll find something, Steve. But the point that you just made there about the furlough and about people having to plan for what they thought was going to be the end of the furlough, and now it's been re-announced that it's going to carry on until the end of March. A load of people have been displaced based on that first bit of information.
Well, yes, they have. The furlough scheme was announced that it was extending. The initial short-term extension was announced, I think, last week when the Prime Minister of the UK told business in a press conference at 6 p.m. on the 31st of October that they were extending furlough. Well, of course, by that point, I'd already seen floods of messages from ex-colleagues and friends who had been let go, by their businesses in light of furlough coming to an end, and obviously the business then not having any active work in the pipeline for those employees, and making an economic decision to terminate or to make make those employees redundant.
Yeah,
I do therefore sort of with obvious sort of consideration to those that have lost their jobs. I do think it was slightly challenging to justify the taxpayer having to pay 6 months of furlough if the job was redundant at the end of October. So it just goes to demonstrate, Chris, actually, those jobs are no longer viable employment. That is not viable employment. So whilst it may well have kept people in a job, it would only have prolonged the inevitable. And is it right and just that the taxpayer should fund that? I don't think so, no.
Yeah, it's a terrible, terrible time for everybody, though, Steve, as well. And obviously some of those employers wanted to make their decision so that it wasn't then centred and waiting on just before Christmas to do it.
Well, look, I know businesses that have made staff redundant, at the end of October, when the first furlough extension was announced, they were already asking their employers if they were able to be, re-engaged and benefit from the furlough extension. And then even more so this week with the Chancellor of the Exchequer announcing on Tuesday or Wednesday, I can't remember which day it was, I think it was Wednesday, the extension of furlough through to March. There's even more kind of uproar and angst from both the employer, from the employee and the employers. What I would say, of course, it's like these lockdowns or the quarantine restrictions coming in place. They're not done with much notice, Chris. Whilst it's very, very apparent that the opposition and those opposed to the lockdown or those opposed to this were calling for action and calling for the furlough to be extended before, I think it is very difficult when you're in government to continue to offer furlough. I think was probably wrong. I think the job support scheme that was offered in the UK was probably the right one, because that had employees back at work, and that ensured that if those jobs were viable, the employee could work 20% of their previous time, and that therefore said and almost sort of validated that these jobs will exist when business returns. If you were actually then, if that were not able to be supported through job support scheme, then unfortunately, as sad as it is, the jobs were probably no longer viable in this climate.
Yeah. And like you said there now, it's easy to criticize whether something should have happened earlier or later or to what degree. But this balance between the health and the economy, And you know, it's also showing a little bit in the US wrestling match between dear Mr. Biden and Mr. Trump. You've got people who, yes, they care about others, but they care about their own financial situation and their futures more. And that dilemma is knocking on the door of all politicians. So whatever they do is never going to be right. It's a tough decision. I just think, you know, the sooner we get to the spring next year and some of these vaccines come out, you know, the better, because it's just a terrible time it's a terrible time for everybody, but especially the aviation industry. Absolutely terrible. Now, one tiny good bit of news,
I'm glad you found something.
Or feel good, Steve. Seriously, we had the privilege of being invited to do a series of 4 podcasts on half of the team of One More Orbit, which was 8 individuals who flew around the world over both poles, and they broke the record. And they did so in a Gulfstream 650 ER, and everything was supported and backed up by Qatar and the chief himself. So I can imagine he put a little bit of his own motivation and support to
his
make
unique
sure that
style
they did break the record. But of the 4, Steve, that we interviewed, 2 astronauts, one who actually docked the Endeavour and landed it back on Earth, and another one who holds the longest amount of days up in space, a cosmonaut, a young lady who fell off a horse, crippled herself, was in a wheelchair, and then came back to actually be part of the crew, and a captain who's an absolute, he's just one of the world's adventurers. He loves to do things, done incredible things. He even took Buzz Aldrin to the South Pole at the age of 86, and his young son at the age of 13. So he holds the record for bringing the oldest person and the youngest person. And he also brought the first Nigerian to the South Pole. He's a star man. So we had the pleasure of interviewing those 4 people, and that series of podcasts is coming out next week. And I would encourage everybody, if you want to just watch something that makes a lot of sense, it has a lot of good teamwork. It has international collaboration involved. It's also got the environment. So it covers all sorts of interesting elements and youngsters. And when you see these youngsters speaking to the crew that were on the aircraft and to some of the astronauts, it's amazing to see their eyes. Absolutely wonderful experience. So that's a little feel-good exercise. Now, another feel-good exercise, Stephen, is we had lots of people contacting us over the last 3 to 4 weeks, commenting on some of the things that we've said about how to support the industry, how to support individuals. And we've spoken behind the scenes about having like a SKYLIGHT CARE platform. So I think it'd be good now just to explain what we're thinking of doing from next week onwards.
Thanks, Chris. You let the cat out of the bag there. SKYLIGHT CARE, that was my big reveal. I was building up to that reveal, but you sort of you did it there. So my moment,
reveal, mate, with that haircut. Don't want to spoil everybody.
It's lovely to see you on such good form on a Friday afternoon, Chris.
Yeah.
So look, I mean, I guess we've been speaking. You and I have been speaking on the podcast. Obviously, we've been speaking offline as well around what can we do to make a difference. In light of, I guess, a couple of things coming together. One is, the airline community and the airline industry and the aviation industry as a whole in its worst ever crisis that it's ever seen. But more so that, and more personal than that, is actually seeing a lot of my friends and colleagues and your friends and many of people known to us and also those not known to us who have lost their jobs as a result of something that they couldn't control. Not even necessarily that their business was badly managed or poorly run or hemorrhaging cash, or their businesses were viable pre-COVID. It's just so sad to see the loss of so many professionals, I think, from our industry, particularly those, well, at both ends of the spectrum, Chris. At the early days in their career, I've heard horror stories about young kids. When I say young kids, I feel, just as I'm approaching 40, Chris, I see, kids that are 19 and 20 for me are now young kids. They wouldn't have been a few years ago. They'd have been my peers. But these kids, have paid a fortune for the pilot's licenses, or for the pilot training, or for the engineering training, or or their scholarships, for or their studies, sorry, for their qualification to get into industry. And then of course they're being let go. And that is really so sad. At the top end of the scale, or so the other end of the spectrum, you've got those that have been in industry for such a long time, who have been so crucial to the success of our industry, and in developing and engendering some of that success, but also in coaching some of the younger people coming through the system. And we're losing them maybe a few years before what would have been ordinarily retirement, so they're forced to take early retirement as a result. But we're losing them still when many of them are in the primes of their career, Chris, and actually able to add a lot of value to the younger generations coming through the system. And there's those in the middle that are just squeezed out because they're sort of wrong place, wrong time, and that's really, really sad. So I think with all of that in mind, what we've spoken about, and this is a sort of world exclusive reveal. We're doing this on a Friday afternoon. It's 4:40. The president of the US is still, or the election result, it's still unknown. They should have sent the counters from Sunderland or Newcastle, who I think always declare first in the UK. They would have probably helped count the bloody votes, but I don't know quite why these idiots take so long counting bloody votes. But so I know this going out on Saturday morning, but sort of exclusively happy to reveal today the launch of SKYLIGHT CARE. So SKYLIGHT Aviation is launching a separate initiative called SKYLIGHT CARE that will be put together or launched to create a platform and a vehicle to bring some of those people affected through this crisis into our extended family within SKYLIGHT Aviation, and to be able to whilst they're maybe not working, or they're not suitably employed, or gainfully employed rather, is to use their skills and use their craftsmanship to develop opportunities together, and to actually leverage some of those experiences, and give people a platform to able to reach out to then the customer base. And actually, therefore, that means saying, actually, what does this mean for the individual? It means we want to give people an opportunity to reach out to us, and with more details on that next week. We will create kind of a broad platform and team who will manage the program of bringing, onboarding people, bringing them in place, giving them the opportunity to share their skills and their experiences with us, and also collectively connecting them to like-minded people that they may not just have that network now, Chris. So they may be sort of sitting there sort of searching within their soul. What do I do? Who do I reach out to? Reach out to headhunters, sign up to job agencies, taking temporary part-time jobs. That's all very well, but we want to help these people really kind of channel some of their focus and use us to support that.
Yeah.
And we're and the other thing then, of course, is how do you then apply that into industry? And what we've got reaches, of course, through our existing customer base into all of our clients, but actually is we've got broader reaches. You and I have discussed, Chris, into other organisations, and we'll be explaining a little bit more about who they are and what that might look like in the weeks to come. But certainly, I'm pleased to announce that, and thanks for your support, Chris, in making this work. But we feel there's really an opportunity for me and my team at SKYLIGHT Aviation to use SKYLIGHT CARE as a way to show our care for those displaced through no fault of their own, but also the care for our industry that we also dearly love and is badly hurting at this difficult time.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes when people are displaced and they're in between, or they're not sure what's going to happen next.
Yeah,
just good that they have a purpose. They feel part of something. They can put together certain tools. They can contribute, and they know that in one way or another they're going to be helping others, and hopefully they'll be able to get themselves back into the industry that they care about.
Yeah.
And love. Yeah, no, it's a great one, Steve. Also, one of the things that I know we've also spoken about behind the scenes as well is reviewing the type of new or different, shall we say, leadership that's going to be required, because with so many people displaced and so many senior people going, the ones who are left then to take up the responsibilities and the accountability for how they move the business forward and maintain, continuity, sustainability, make sure they're agile and resilient. It's going to be difficult if they're not given any support. But one of the things that needs to be done in parallel to that is to help people understand that all of us need to be led at some point, and we need to be led in a certain way to make sure that the company is sustainable, because then it's good for everybody. So instead of people thinking, well, he or she's a good leader or a bad leader, think what it's like to be a leader and what the demands are and the pressures there. And if everybody works together, A, on how to lead differently and more effectively, and B, how to be led more effectively and differently. And I think that's something that the industry needs to check up on now and look, because there's going to be so much pressure on so many people left.
Yeah, it's so sad, so sad. I mean, people always, we did this on our very first podcast, Chris, when we before this all started, which seems like a couple of years ago now, but I suspect it was only last summer. And when you asked me about how I got into the business and how I got into aviation, and one of the things I said was, there were one or two guiding lights along the way that gave me opportunity. And this now is about saying, actually, what opportunities can we give? Can Skylight Aviation give to others that are seeking out they're still willing to commit, they're still able to commit, they're absolutely, for want of a better term, they will wasted sitting at home twiddling their thumbs whilst they wait for industry to pick up again. Actually, now it's about trying to leverage that and capitalize on it and use it to give them an opportunity to get back into the business in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, 100%. It's really admirable. It's the right thing to do, and the more people that do it, the better. Because we've always been saying, everybody says collaboration is an overused word and coming together, and it's all like, just rhetoric. But if people actually do it, it will make a difference. And there's no better time to do it than this time of the year. No matter what religion, color, race, nationality, it doesn't matter. Everybody needs to help each other. So, yeah, that's a little bit of positive news, Steve. Well done, sir, as always. Now you look at the reality. So you've got IAG, they're looking now at the Praetors again and supporting cargo. And it's ironic that when you look at the coin, and it has two such contrasting sides, one where you've got cargo, which is anything from 85 to 95% of what it was. And then you've got the passenger side, which is a 90% loss. So it's incredible. And one now is going to affect the other as we go into these next 4 to 6 months, because, everything still needs to be delivered. It still needs to be supplied, but the capacity is just falling off. So, it's going to be a tough period, but it's going to be very, very buoyant for cargo.
I think we're coming into a deep, dark winter, unfortunately, as we said before. I think this is going to be an unhappy and unfriendly time for many businesses. This absolutely now is about battening down the hatches and ensuring that they're in survival mode, because otherwise, I don't think that all the businesses, in fact, I'm certain, Chris, not all the businesses will come through the winter period. It's sad to say.
Yeah.
So we'll see more negative news and more damaging kind of effects to our beloved industry before we see some good news, I think.
Yeah. And then you've got EasyJet selling off aircraft and saying that there's going to be no more than 20% of their capacity in operation. I mean, that's a tough one. You've got BA, as I've just said. You've got Thai, 34 aircraft on sale. I mean, it's incredible, Steve.
Well, other than the leasing firms, I'm not sure who's going to buy these aircraft. Of course, you've also, on the other end of the scale, Chris, you got Airbus and Boeing OEMs, still manufacturing, but I suspect that they'll go into some form of shutdown. But very difficult to shut down aerospace plants, as Airbus said before. It's not sort of not a case of just turning off the lights and waiting for deliveries to pick up. Of course, there are some of these new deliveries still required and go into businesses. I mean, a lot of these, certainly the new engine options, the Neos, for example, they are fundamental to future unit cost improvements and optimizing costs. So I think we still see a lot of that activity. It'd be good for Boeing to get the NG program, or the MAX program rather. Sorry, the NG program was the previous one, to get the MAX program back in shape. But news this week, we're hearing it's highly likely that some airlines will go into, let's say, hibernation over the winter. And I think that's obviously one, primarily about cost and preservation and as I said, being able to survive. But secondly, I think it sends a very strong signal to government that the support is really lacking for aviation and our the aviation infrastructure whether that be service partners or service providers or airlines and airports themselves. There was a ministerial briefing from the aviation minister earlier this week, and that was rather an embarrassing affair. The Whitehall technology didn't work at first. For those that were on the call, they would have known. And then the call that happened thereafter with a much smaller group of people basically gave us no further information than we'd already known from the Prime Minister's statement. So there was no, we were hopeful that being called to this briefing on Monday or Tuesday night at 7 o'clock was a good thing. Get a briefing directly from the minister responsible for aviation, but actually it wielded nothing, and that is sadly what we've come to expect from this government here. Unlike we are seeing in other countries where government really have stepped up to the plate. Unfortunately for aviation, is the hardest hit industry in during the pandemic. I think there has been no bespoke support in many countries, and actually I think government, people, and economy overall will suffer as a result. Unfortunately for us, furlough and job support schemes we're only scratching the surface and touching the sides. This will have long-lasting damaging effects, and short-sighted governments, including of our own in the United Kingdom, whom I used to be a strong advocate of, Chris, as you well know, have let themselves down and let the industry down massively.
Yeah, but Steve, you know what I'm saying, right? I'm not the brightest bulb in the chandelier, but it's as if there should just be a basic formula. Everybody needs aircraft to supply everything else. Okay, so why would you not support it to a certain degree and also filter down not just the carriers, but airports, carriers, handling companies, etc.? Why not have a straightforward criteria? Obviously, some of the businesses were not doing as well as they should have done previously, so there should have been some sort of sustainability or capability.
Well, they should be ineligible. Yeah. I mean, if businesses were poorly managed before, and they were a bit of basket case, they should have been totally ineligible for support.
Yes, exactly.
Unless they were profitable, viable businesses, sustainable businesses before COVID, they should got access to nothing. Instead, now what the Chancellor has done, he's found his magic money tree once again, and he's going to pay furlough for another 6 months. I mean, I think that's utterly outrageous. Protecting jobs that no longer exist. What he should be doing is channeling those billions of pounds of support into the right industries, and particularly in aviation, where the GDP multiple effect of aviation, Chris, is something between 2 to 8 times, depending on the business and the location. So there's massive flow through effect from airlines through to the whole of sector. You're absolutely right. Coming up to Christmas, where is all this cargo capacity going to come from? How willing will these airlines be, Chris, to support the airlift, for the vaccine? Something of that scale and magnitude, akin to kind of Operation Dunkirk. I mean, I think that in itself is going to be a very, you're laughing there, Chris. I don't know why, but something of that magnitude and scale.
That's a reveal early as well.
Something of that magnitude and scale, Chris, is will these airlines be willing to support? I mean, from a model perspective, that's probably not in question. But actually, if they've got aircraft mothballed or tied up, or they've got 75, 80 aircraft in their 100 aircraft fleet, taken out of service and mothballed, how easy and willing will they be to support such an airlift? I'm not quite so sure.
Yeah, no. There needs to be a concentrated overview and some sort of agreed capability as well, because that's something that's going to be necessary, for all of the farmer people. But you're talking about the vaccines now. There's Ethiopian ready to distribute. There's so many people now looking at it. You've got the NHS here saying that they're getting ready and prepared just in case something comes through before Christmas. But the expectation now has been brought forward. So that is good news, Steve.
Well, it's good news also. I mean, the irony is the UK went into lockdown yesterday, and infection rates are falling, which we saw today. So this is I mean, sort of, the data is becoming slightly clouding the judgment of the model imperative, and the model imperative is not always the right one. Actually, it should be backed up by, dare I say, the science. But it's very difficult, Chris. I mean, I think personally, this lockdown in the UK has only further compromised and damaged business that was possibly not necessary, in light of seeing the evidence of some of the control measures that were put in place a few weeks ago in terms of the tiered structure. And all it's done now is actually accelerate the hibernation of some airlines into non-operations. I think it's it's very difficult. As you know, I was overseas last week, and it's very a lot some much stronger lockdowns were in evidence in those parts of Europe earlier in the pandemic, and now we've got this massive effect and this rise again. You have to sort of question, say, well, actually, do we keep doing the same thing again and again and again and believing it's the right thing, or do we try something different? I'd probably better not to answer that, because it might get me into hot water.
No, you're right. But you know what I'm saying, that it is encouraging now about the vaccines, and now with the fact that they've got to pack them in a certain way, for such frozen temperatures, it's going to need even more. And so one of the things that's got to be done now is, how do you distribute from hubs? How do you then further distribute? The last mile issue is going to be important. So there's so much flexibility that all these task forces and all these special groups, they need certain coordination and standards.
It's just disappointing, Chris. Really disappointing. I mean, I'm sure I speak for many. It's tough times, and actually, what you want is not people just to wrap their arms around you and give you a hug at the end of the day. Actually, what you want is tangible, meaningful support that will provide a platform to get businesses that were viable before the pandemic back onto a decent shoring, so that when capacity is returned when demand is returned, they can return capacity. Without that, they won't be able to do so. And I think I think we're in dangerous territory now of shooting ourselves in the foot.
Yeah.
I say ourselves, government, not us. we are mere mortals in this world, Chris.
Indeed. And as mere mortals, it's ironic to look at the amount of individuals now who are using private aviation, to get away during the lockdown, and there'll probably be more of it as well if the lockdown continues.
They may well, those kind of fellas may well describe themselves as immortals, but there's only one immortal, which is far from here. But yes, I mean, look, if you're lucky enough to be able to do that, and great for the general aviation business, who sort of starting to see recovery before the commercial airline sector, much earlier. It's fantastic, but that is I don't know, it's probably less than 1% of the global population can do that, if even 1%. So I mean, it's something, it's relevant for those general aviation businesses, but it's certainly not relevant for people I'd meet on the street downstairs.
No, of course not. But at the end of the day, people that you'd meet downstairs or on the street are also working for companies that are supplying and supporting the private aviation sectors as well. So it's all part of the big aviation family. So, but it just goes to show how people have got the willingness to go somewhere, provided they see it as a safe, or they've got the confidence in it. And I think private aviation is managing to give that.
Yeah.
Now, again, on a positive thing, I don't know what your thoughts are, Steve, but whether people are starting to consider what has nature done in its own way by giving everybody a little bit of breathing space to reflect on what was done previously and don't make the same mistakes again, as you said there. Will it be done differently in the future? Will people look at things differently? Will they look at the climate? Will they look at the world we live on? And will they start to do things differently? That's another issue now. But it's also now a bit of a conundrum, because all of those issues like going electric, etc., normally more expensive, or airports have to facilitate the electricity and the capability and the power to do so. It's very difficult to see that now moving ahead in a better way for at least a few years.
Yeah, I think I think there's a lot of probably scratching the head going on. I mean, this time has been maybe helpful for some, but I think for most it's a distraction. As I said to you, Chris, I think privately, if not on here, I don't like new normal. I kind of like normal. Old normal was just fine. We were doing just fine. So I don't necessarily believe that it's anything from nature or to give us a kick up the arse, do anything differently. I think because there's a lot of people that have sadly had a kick up the arse, and you look at the impact of mental health, and that was not necessarily the helpful prod that they wanted. and I'm conscious of that as well. This has been a very trying time for many, obviously. But one thing I do see, Chris, is it was nice to see the skies. I mean, it was as beautiful as it was.
Yeah.
Seeing an aircraft in the sky. It was lovely to see, Mother Nature and all her glory. And I think I said to you before, we were spending a lot more time with nature than we ever would have done before.
Yeah.
Those aircraft, started to come back again around September, October, and you'd see them filling the skies again. For the most part, they've disappeared again.
Yeah.
And so I think that's quite sad. But hey, look, we are where we are. I think whether the vaccine is the sort of the silver bullet, which I don't think it is personally, is yet to be believed. But even the distribution and logistics of that will take a very long time, and confidence levels, as we know, and we've seen some of the polling that they've done, won't seem to be restored until that vaccine exists.
Yeah. And the crazy thing now, you're talking about the silver bullet, it looks like you have to be shot twice now because you've got to have a double dose of it.
Well, it said maybe the vaccine only gives you immunity for 3 to 6 months.
Yeah, and then you'll have to have it a couple of times a year. And now, what about this crazy one now with Mink, and the fact that it's a mutated virus within Mink, and now they're culling Mink in Denmark and Spain. I mean, that's crazy, huh?
Well, I thought Mink went out of fashion a few years ago, but maybe that was just for the fur coat. But for the poor animal, who's probably done quite well since Mink went out of fashion. Of course that's very sad. But then these crazies thought before that there was what was that animal called in China that what was that? I can't remember what the animal was that they said this thing started from. Maybe nature is left best to be enjoying the planet rather than eaten or interfered with. But I saw that wonderfully intelligent, competent, professional, expert Transport Secretary of the United Kingdom, Grant Shapps. He immediately banned or Denmark came off the quarantine list last night. Well, Denmark's got not a bloody case in sight. Yet for some reason, because this Mink strain had mutated, he decided to. How many Danes come into contact with Mink every day?
Well, there's not many, but it is starting to creep up. And although
this is just ridiculous, Chris. This is propagating fear, and it's unhelpful, and it's bloody stupid.
Yeah, well put, as usual.
Why use 10 words when you can use 3?
Yeah. No, fair enough. Now, Thai Airways, we've spoken about them before. 34 aircraft on sale, including the entire.
So I guess Thai is a bit of an example of a basket case that I spoke about before as well. They've got a long pedigree. Chris, they've been around for a very long time, but they've never made money in decades. And massive corruption cases, political scandals involving Thai Airways. Very sad for the thousands of people that work for Thai Airways, and they do offer a really reasonably decent product. But I'm not surprised. They should have culled the fleet probably years ago and culled their massive employee base, normalised it, and right-sized it and fixed their costs out. So not surprised at all. Yeah,
but you've put that very, very, very clearly, Stephen. So I think there's.
Well, if people disagree with my assessment of Thai, that's their right. If they did disagree and want to have a debate about it, I'm happy to. But if you look, but Chris, here's what we believe. I mean, fundamentally, is it right that the Thai taxpayer props up an airline that has had tens of billions of dollars in the last 10 years? Fundamentally, that's wrong.
Yeah,
and
I agree.
I am not surprised by the outcome.
No, I agree, Steve. That's why I'm saying that when this starts to come back again, there should be a different criteria that's put into businesses to make sure that there's a focus on the sustainability, the continuity, and cash flow, etc. So anybody that's not managing the business the way it should, then there should be either an exit strategy, or there should be some sort of propping or some sort of support whereby somebody else advises them how to run the business more effectively. And if that happens, then good enough. If it doesn't, then it has to contract until it gets to a point where it can perform properly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things we saw this week was Ryanair they are now on the prowl They are sort of stalking every opportunity as it presents itself. And they said they will pick up routes and capacity where others are sort of falling off. Now that won't happen instantly, as we know, but they are ready to move. And the reason they're doing that is because they're well disciplined. They've got strong DNA in their fabric, and they can respond to competitive changes. I saw this week actually really interesting. Blue Air, which is a Romanian carrier that many may not know, but they've announced that 5 weekly services going into Heathrow. Of course, where these airlines have got the opportunity now, Chris, they're able to capitalize on them and take the slots, for example, that would never have been available to them before. Not quite sure how they got those slots. I'm not quite sure how that's happened. Some probably loan or exchange, I suspect, or not exchange, but a loan basis, given others will not be used. But because of course the moratorium's in effect to the end of the winter schedule. But Wizz Air, the reason we keep talking about Wizz Air, Chris, and being so positive Wizz Air is because Wizz Air are able to capitalize on others that are in difficult state. I think the challenge is the competitive dynamic will massively reset. I suspect it might well reset in favor of the consumer, and that is no bad thing.
No, I agree. But again, coming back, those that have been well managed and have got good books, it's wrong then that others who've got bad management and bad books then get supported and propped up again, because then it just drags everything down again, and it's wrong.
Which is exactly those that are managed well. So, for example, Joe Varady, Willie Walsh previously, IAG, and Michael O'Leary said exactly that, Chris. They said, why are the German taxpayers, funding Lufthansa to the tune of what X? Why are the Italian taxpayers funding Alitalia? Why is the Thai taxpayer having to fund, the continued prop up of Thai Airways? Now, there are, for some aviation and airlines, national airlines, state-owned airlines, it's quite a romantic thing. Every minister and his bloody dog gets involved in the airline when it's a state-owned thing, because for all their perks and their friends' businesses, and they all get contracts from the companies. But really, I mean, these guys, Michael, Willie, and Joe, had a very valid point. We are not competing then on an even keel. Is that state aid? Is that state aid welcome, or will it distort future competition?
Yep. A decision that only time will show and time will tell. But
indeed.
Logic and common sense has got to start to prevail now, especially over the next 6 months. It's crazy what's going on.
Absolutely.
Stephen, my friend, I think that's where we'll leave it again for another week. I hope you have a lovely evening this Friday, even though people will see it tomorrow on Saturday.
I shall be waiting with bated breath for the for this. I'm not sure. I mean, just to close, because I'm not sure. I mean, surely there must be a better way to count these votes. I mean, I just don't understand how this takes so long. Maybe some of our correspondents who are sympathetic to US political affairs may be able to tell us why it takes them so long to count so few votes.
Oh, Stephen, I think it's a sad reflection, and it's also, I mean, it's not the most impressive when you see a country, a nation that is so powerful, and then you see the two men up there on stage. I mean, there's not a great deal to, I just find it amazing, but I just think it's a sad reflection that, to be a politician these days, it's not about what experiences you've had. And if you've had good experience, it means you've made mistakes. Well, if you've made mistakes in politics, they're plastered all over the press. You don't want to be open.
I mean, so you can see the division. I mean, it's right down the line. It's basically 50-50 if you look at the popular voters, particularly the states that haven't declared. But we're going from America, the land of the free, the land of opportunity, potential of switching from a 74-year-old misogynist to a 78-year-old dementia-ridden grandfather who forgot that his son was dead. And I mean, God, good Lord, I mean, what on earth are we? The land of opportunity, eh? There we go. Also, on that note,
hold on, Steve. It also goes to show how the pollsters keep getting it wrong.
Wow, they've been wrong since 2015, since the Brexit
but
nonsense.
How crazy that it's so wrong.
Well, I think I'm not a shy conservative, Chris. I'm not a shy Tory. So
hey, Boris brings Britain back.
Boris brings Britain back. I've got my T-shirt.
Yeah.
there are a lot of shy Conservatives. So I do think on the Republican side there would be those that would have, you know, not call out their. But if the pollsters haven't worked that out yet, after all these years of being shy Conservatives, because I think it's a wrong thing to do. I don't think there's anything wrong with conservatism at all. But prudent fiscal management is another name for it. But
Very good, Stephen.
look, there we go. I'm going to go and enjoy my little creatures, my pale ale from Western Australia, Fremantle, for those that know it. It's a fabulous drop. If anyone wants to try it, you can buy it in Waitrose or other good UK supermarkets.
There you are, ladies and gentlemen. You've heard it. Try it. Let us know what you think of it. We'll see you all again next week. Steve, as always, mate, great pleasure. Lovely to see you. Thanks very much again.
Thanks, Chris. Cheers.